Hi everyone, I'm Stan from Eagle Vision. I'm here with James Polacek. James, welcome.
Thanks, Stan.
So this time around, we want to take a little bit of a more geographic tact for some of our interviews. James is extremely experienced in buying and selling land and residential marketing projects in South Australia. So I want to talk about SA in particular and Adelaide. And so the topic of the videos is going to be buying land in SA, whether it's off market or it's retail, but James is certainly the one to tell us. So James, maybe share a little bit about your background and how you established Poly Property.
Thanks, Stan. Yeah, I suppose pretty close to the mark. I've probably spent almost 20 years in residential project marketing. So that's across probably the entirety of SA. Includes a little bit of urban infill, but includes greenfield and brownfield type projects as well.
Yep.
A lot of retail selling, but we also act on behalf of our clients to source land and new project sites.
Yeah, sure thing. So Adelaide has had a lot of positives over the last couple of years. Why buy land in SA?
I think Adelaide has been a consistent performer for a period of time. A lot of the other states, and particularly the eastern states, which can be high growth at times, can be inconsistent. Adelaide's now catching up. Last year in 2023, Adelaide was the best performing state in the nation. Grew by over 11%. Our average home price now is in the mid 700s, I believe $758,000. Which is up about $76,000 on the 2022 figures.
Wow.
So best in nation results, which is, I think, perhaps the second time we've done that in the last few years. The other thing that COVID has done, even though it feels like a bit of a distant memory now, is that we did achieve positive net migration for the first time in 2021. So That is in no small part the reason for our growth, and hopefully that's set to continue.
Yeah, sure thing. And so what are, I guess, some of the dynamics of the market here in Adelaide?
I think it's gone through that transition phase where we've gone from sleepy, consistent growth to perhaps being now the no longer undiscovered gem. Typically, we were selling to our own, whereas I think the difference now is that migration has really impacted things. We have lots of ex-Adelaideans or ex-South Australians coming back from interstate. Whether they're downsizing, they can work remotely and still have their interstate or overseas based job from Adelaide. But also we have a really interesting intricacy from the government, which considers South Australia or Adelaide a regional centre. And so we actually have lots of overseas migrants chasing Adelaide because it's an easier place to get into Australia.
Yeah, sure thing. So look, for us, I've kind of been a bit of a recent migrant into SA over the last sort of 5 years. I've witnessed some of the stuff that the government talks about, and I've kind of seen quite a difference between what the government here does versus some of the other states. So maybe talk a bit about what their approach to development is.
Yeah, sure. I think South Australian government is fairly recently a Labor government, and Peter Malinowskis, our Premier, is pretty good at doing what he says he's going to do. Obviously, politicians have an interesting track record, but basically they want to contribute to the housing affordability crisis, as it's been called in the media. For sure. But they back up, let's say, with new land releases. So just in the last couple of weeks, we had an announcement for approximately 1,000 new homes in 3 different parts of SA. One to the north in Hillier Park, in Westlake, so very much in a suburban Adelaide, and to the south at O'Sullivan Beach. So I think it's roughly sort of 500, 400 and 100 in those different spots. And that's not only just going to create volume, but diversity.
Yeah, sure thing. So in Victoria, there was this thing called the growth corridors. How is that handled here in SA?
So we have a similar terminology. Growth corridor comes up quite a bit for Adelaide. There's probably 3 parts of Adelaide which are most considerable when talking about that from a state level. In our northern suburbs, that's probably been a growth corridor for some significant period of time, and part of the government's focus to release more land is Hillier Park, as I just mentioned.
Sure.
We also have Mount Barker, which I believe is still the fastest growing postcode in Australia.
Oh, wow.
I believe that will become its own regional centre at some point, but it's still only really 45 minutes from Adelaide. So extremely fast growing area with more both private and public land releases all the time via rezoning or otherwise. And then south of Adelaide is the other big growth corridor. So O'Sullivan Beach, as I mentioned earlier, that's an extra 100 or so homes in this tranche. But just before Christmas, there was another announcement with, I believe, about 1,000 new homes in the Selix or Dinga region as well, which was a government release. So just shows the proactivity there. But those three regions are the biggest. Adelaide also has some great opportunities for urban infill with brownfield sites as well.
Right, okay. So Adelaide, the nature of it is that there's hills to the east and water to the west. And those kind of block a little bit of spread this way.
Yes.
But it can certainly go north and south.
Absolutely. Yes.
So how do prices kind of fluctuate around those?
I think it's an interesting question, I suppose. The pricing spread to the north and south is gradual, and there are better and worse land subdivisions within those regions. So our urban sprawl is significantly more concentrated north and south of the city because the hills block us in there. And that's why Nambucca is going to end up a regional centre. But it also is why the government focuses more to the north and the south. Just because it's easier for them to build light rail for that eventually, or to utilise existing light rail. Yeah,
and there's also the duplication of the motorway, I think, down south.
So we've got our expressway that goes down south. We've recently had an extension just to get it as a dual carriageway further south, and that includes some of those land releases we just talked about. Correct. We also have a brand new northern motorway, which is absolutely fantastic. There was, I think, an investment in the billions for that one, and that connects all the way up past Gawler. So that's actually provided for probably the next decade or so of land releases and development to the north, where that might 20 minutes off journeys in some cases. So
so Gawler, interesting that you mention it, because in a way, would that be the next kind of Mount Barker growing postcode, do you think?
Similar but different. So Gawler has been its own regional centre for a period of time. It's actually been that our growth to the north has been so significant that the Adelaide metropolitan area is actually closing in on Gawler itself.
Right.
So rather than being a regional centre, I suspect Gawler probably gets encompassed by Adelaide in many ways and becomes a part of Adelaide at some point.
Right, okay, got it. So what are, I guess, some of the employment drivers? Obviously there's migration, but do those people that migrate here, do they then stay or do they head off to other states?
It's a good question. Because the net migration really en masse has started only in the last few years, some of it will remain to be seen. I think the employment drivers in SA are a big reason why people are coming back from elsewhere though. So we have some really significant defence contracts. We've had a really big influx of multinationals coming in with their Southern Hemisphere or even global head offices based in Adelaide or predominantly in the north of Adelaide, because that's close to some of the defence contracts that we're affiliated with. We also have a really significant pipeline for health and medical research and care in Adelaide. Part of that is the transition of our hospitals to new facilities, and then part of it is adjunct to that with similar and assisting industries.
Yeah, sure. And also there was this whole thing about space agency being set up here. I'm not sure how much that's actually going to impact on the employment, but
Space Agency, I suspect, will have a really big impact longer term. I mean, the interesting thing was the big announcement when that came out a few years ago. I think we started off with about 6 or 8 employees, but they've also just received in 2022, I believe, received another big tranche of funding. So that team has multiplied significantly. And of course, the Australian Space Agency is not a small deal. So that will actually become a big driver, and that's actually adjacent to the CBD.
Yeah, interesting. Look, there's a lot to be sort of excited about for investing in Adelaide or buying land and doing projects in Adelaide. And look, we're going to talk a lot more about that, but that's all that we sort of wanted to cover in this episode, just on a bit of high level. Next time around, we'll talk about buying land specifically. Thanks so much for watching.